sunglasses. I also have crazy eyes and everything. But oh, hey guys, what's going on? Memes here, and I
Yep.
am joined by Miss Caleigh Fisher, and we're going to talk about a little bit of neutron decay cosmology here. We overcame the technical hump a little bit earlier because apparently YouTube comment sections don't like you putting links in them. So these things happen. But hey, Benny, what's going on, my friend? Okay, so Caleigh, neutron decay cosmology. What's going on?
Hey, so do we want to do a quick, let's do the neutron decay cosmology in 1 minute?
Sure, let's
Or,
start
or
with that,
are
and
we
we'll
assuming
dissect it a
are
little
we
bit.
assuming that everyone who's watching right now already knows neutron decay cosmology?
Not at all, because right now
See, yeah.
I'm broadcasting to YouTube, I'm broadcasting to Facebook. So basically, long story short, is I came across Caleigh in some of Professor Stephen Wolfram's live streams. Talk about neutron decay cosmology. And what is this? And
Ah,
just
there it is.
I'm hearing a lot of different things, and I'm like, I think we're talking about a lot of the same stuff, and just you're honing on energy density. That's been extremely useful to me, just because that explains so much that I think we too often overlook. But take it away.
Oh, okay. Okay, so neutron decay cosmology, the quick wind up is very simple. Okay, so however you see it, however the universe began, is that on screen? I think that's on screen, right? Yeah.
Yep, I
Okay,
made you big
so
for this.
however the universe began, let's even forget about that, whether you want it to be Big Bang or not, you know, regardless, there was a bunch of hydrogen, right? And this hydrogen over time could, because gravity and other binding forces, but overwhelmingly apparently because gravity initially, which I'll buy, slowly crushes this hydrogen, right? And it crushes it, and then you end up in the star for a while, and you get crushed some more, and you become some other element. Maybe you're some iron now. But you used to be some hydrogen, and then you got crushed and got turned into a neutron, and then maybe lost an electron and turned into a proton later or something like that, or got separated from your electron. But regardless, this unit of matter is going to follow this path where it ends up getting crushed and crushed and crushed and crushed. And the end spot on this path is an event horizon, because the inevitability of gravity, you know? And so you end up at the event horizon. And my simple thing is, okay, so you think about what was the moment just before event horizon? You were a neutron star.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically you were all neutrons. So all these protons and electrons got squished back into themselves. All this hydrogen got turned into neutrons. Now, interesting fact that most people overlook is the fact that neutrons, when they decay into hydrogen.
Yeah, well,
This
it's
is
atomic hydrogen, I
overwhelming
believe.
atomic hydrogen, but that's the, like, initially, that's like the most common, that's where everything started, and then atomic hydrogen bonds with another hydrogen to stabilize eventually. But atomic hydrogen is basically what the universe started off being, in theory. A bunch of it might have fused early on, whatever, models. But I think a lot of people don't really remember that. So it's like, okay, so here you are at your event horizon, and your neutron star inverts and like collapses into the black wholeness that we can't calculate because numbers and zeros and things. And what happens?
We have some calculation, but we don't know what's going on.
Right,
we
that's
can
the thing. You
judge and
can't
estimate. Yeah.
you can't calculate past the event horizon, because at the moment of event horizon calculating, basically what you end up getting is total internal reflection at that point. So it makes it a singularity point where that you can't know what happens anymore, because it looks like nothing
Our
happens.
mathematics
But
lead to singularities, which seem to be problematic. Yeah.
right, which is why, oh my gosh, who was it? Was it you? Who was it? It was you, wasn't it? It was intervening Jonathan Garrard. Who was it just
I
recently?
I did, and there was another gentleman whom I'm hoping to have on because they had a fantastic discussion a few weeks ago. I did have Jonathan on in this past February.
No, okay, he was on somebody very recently.
Okay,
I didn't
yeah.
think it was
I
you.
just recently watched that. Go on.
And Jonathan mentioned this mathematical proof that I think this Chinese guy ran into recently with the Euler equations.
Oh,
Where
they
you,
showed that it does blow up, apparently.
at some point, yeah, at some scale, at some point, there's like basically there's limits. That's what it
Hmm.
comes down to, right? It's like there's limits. It's like there's a smallest drop of water that wants to be a drop of water. This is the thing I come back to. Like here in gravity of Earth right now, it wouldn't matter whether I had a little tiny, tiny hole spigot or a straw.
Hmm.
If you slowly let water out, that water is going to collect into a droplet that is almost the same size regardless. Because that's
I
the
love what you're saying. No, it goes into membranes because this is something that Jen on her blog, which I feel like my friend from the Church Entropy YouTube channel, basically she was going into this for a while on her blog. I feel like she's the scientific equivalent of the mixed up files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankworth because like her articles are all over the place. I try to find them, Caleigh, and I'm like, this was such a wonderful thing. But she did have these things with the droplets going on. It sounds exactly like what you're saying. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Continue.
no, but that's a thing. It's like this Navier-Stokes thing as well. It's like this separation of like singularity-ness becoming singularity creates this weird super tension at the point. But there's also this innate, it's like that's what to me, like that's what the fine structure constant, though I don't know enough. I need to investigate the fine structure constant to see how we derive it and what its significance really, really is to try and wrap my head around it, which I haven't done yet. But like in terms of epsilon,
I found the Quanta
yeah,
article about
mu naught and epsilon naught, which is basically the permittivity and permeability of space. These things are just like seem to be physical constraints of it's like this is just what space is made of. You know, this is what space is made of. And it's a dielectric fluid of some kind because it doesn't carry charge. In fact, it's the perfect dielectric. It doesn't seem to want to, but that means at the same time, it's like that means that charge is always localized to where it's applied. So as soon as you have something, all the charge is like goes there, sort of thing, you know? Like it's funny thing about charge because it's like
charge seems to exist, maybe not necessarily in the vacuum to our observation, but since there appears to be something there. Some folks called it the ether and stuff before. Now I'm hearing a lot about superfluidity, and when I hear the discussion of superfluidity, I'm like, that sounds a lot like the ether.
no,
But
that's totally the ether.
I'm just saying the fact that charge seems to take form in our realm of persistence outside of that, in and of itself, is interesting.
Right, because even in a quantum mechanical world, from my understanding, it's like, you know, then the tension of that charge exists in the quantum electric field, you know, without naturally manifesting because it doesn't have anything to manifest on. But we'll pretend like those charge field lines exist in the substance of distance, right?
We're
Sort
getting
of,
into
it's
what the grid is there. And I just need a comment on Mr. Gregory there. He says, I guess it's the one time you want your neurons to be negative and not so positive. The interesting thing is our conceptualization of what is positive and negative, I think, goes back to Mr. Franklin.
oh,
And
that's so
I think he
backwards. That's
mixed it up.
exactly backwards.
Yes. I wonder if that's going to lead us to some insight just because I'm sorry, go on.
No, I think that that's something I strayed across a long time ago, and it just made no sense to me. It's like, okay, so, you know, like once you research back and you find out that it's completely arbitrary whether negative seen as an inflow or an outflow or a divergence or a convergence. It was completely arbitrary on Ben Franklin's part. And as soon as you realize that, you go, wait, so I could make it whichever way I wanted. And then you go, which would make sense. And to me, it just makes sense that, okay, whatever, proton is mass, and therefore it's a convergence of space. And given Casimir forces, therefore this is a concentration of charge, and therefore we'll call this positive. Okay, because it's a proton and that's where the mass is. So it seems to make sense. It's like, okay, so therefore divergence must be negative, and that's, we'll apply logic in our determination. It's like Ben Franklin didn't know enough about electricity to have made that determination at such an early point, I think is the thing. You know,
well, that's the thing. We didn't have the technology and stuff that we have nowadays.
He had just barely, they were all just barely starting out, though. I haven't built one yet, but I really want to build a Leyden jar, because I get the feeling it's like there must be a way of storing electricity, something like that. Like, can't you just fill a jar full of electricity? Like, you know, it's like,
well, now we're just getting into all different types of field theory and stuff. And I remember that Veritasium got a lot of people's noggins a jogging. Whereas, like, before, just even I was like, well, we're just sending a whole bunch of electrons down via the cord. It's like, are we? Or is that cord stimulating the field that's around it? It's almost like there's, at least to our just standard viewing, a hidden force underlying all things.
right. Yeah, here it is, the little diagram for it, right? Exactly. It's like when you start this, it's like, well, the thing is to remember, it's like you forget, because we're taught that all the electricity is in the battery. But that the wire is full of electricity already. It's full of electrons already. It's exactly how full it wants to be of electrons.
Yeah.
So it's more like that thing where it's like, this is a pipe full of water. And as soon as you start pushing water through here, water will start coming out here. You know? But where does that electricity come from? From there. Oh. And in my model, which is all Bernoulli, right? Like,
thank you for sharing that with me, because I had heard that. I had some other friends that did some videos on that, but I hadn't really paid attention to it till you mentioned that. But go on.
Yeah, so in that model, it's like, okay, so you turn on the electricity. So suddenly you're basically making, instead of the electricity just sort of floating around in the atoms, you now laminarize or laminate the electricity by putting the charge through it. So now all of a sudden, all the electron flows are going that way. Right? You oriented them suddenly.
Well, that's the thing, because as soon as you have an electric field and it's doing some jiggling there, that gives rise to a magnetic field, and kind of the inverse. Once you have a magnetic field doing something, it ends up creating an electric field. And just, that's one of those things where I just find it fascinating.
Well, because they're the same. It's like you're looking at the same thing from 90 degrees.
That's another thing that you had brought up in a couple of points, and I'm like,
you know, like even like if you take a cube, and if you look at a cube corner on, it's a hexagon with like rhombic faces. You know, it's like, depends how you look at it. I think how you see it, but you know, you start this flow going, and as soon as you have this flow going, Bernoulli, this is going at light speed, because everything's moving at the speed of light. And you go, so now you have a super low pressure at the wire, which draws in a field this way, which is the electric field. And it has an innate chirality, because we're on one side of a manifold, which is the magnetic. And I think like everything, in a way, to my mind, especially talking to kids up to a certain level, and I'm not even sure if the math will hold all the way through, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's just Bernoulli, really. The electric field is Bernoulli. It's the draw. It's the low pressure gradient caused by the wire. If there's more current in the wire, then there's a lower pressure. If there's more voltage in the wire, there's also more pressure, because one is sort of like the speed of the flow and one is like the volume of the flow, you know? And then the magnetic field is just a calculation off of this flow rate, right? Because one is just a sort of a reflection, a different way of looking at the other one.
Right. No, anytime you can have one thing doing stuff and then it just gives rise to the other, and then you see basically some form of an inversion there, it's like that should be telling us something.
Except for a static field, which is why static is therefore primary.
Could you elaborate?
Well, I mean, like when you have a charge, there is no magnetic field to this charge. There's no, the magnetic field has no orientation in this when you have only a charge. You don't even have current yet.
So when we have something essentially that's like a point particle, kind of like, or at least like an electron or a proton, is that what
it has? Like? It has to move. There has to be. You got to have that delta, that change.
All right.
Because now you go like this, and over this vector, you can now create a low pressure because you've got movement along a line.
Right.
So, and you also get that entrainment thing, which I think is the most fascinating thing.
What was that again? What was it called?
Entrainment, you know, like, which is basically this. It's like you blow and stuff gets sucked in to this. And this entrainment is universal. I mean, think of it. It's like an idea, and a meme starts going, and then people get sucked into it because of the velocity of this idea sucks attention into it. It's like it doesn't matter what it is. Like entrainment is so universal. Even if you're just pointing, you're standing on the street. You get 2 or 3 people looking up and pointing. It doesn't matter where they're pointing. Other people will start looking. It's rubbernecking. It's all the same
thing. If somebody's driving, why is there so much traffic? Oh, there's an accident, but the accident's been pulled off to the side of the road. Well, people, like you said, they're doing the rubbernecking. They slow down, and I remember taking, what was it, information systems or something back in college. It's just like, okay, or it was process management, something like that. It's like, all right, this ends up causing this ends up causing this down the line. And thank you. I had not heard that word before until right now. So I go on to our friend Wolfram Alpha, entrainment. Noun, any of several processes in which a solid or liquid is put into motion by a fluid. That sounds like exactly what you just said. Continue.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting idea because it applies to so many things. It's like if you imagined, like the way I imagined gravity, even if it's a whole bunch of little spinning balls, all those balls create a monstrous low pressure that sucks everything towards it.
Okay, it's because again, according to general relativity, it's the curvature of space-time, but it's like, okay, if it's a curvature,
yeah, but I mean that curvature is curvature of whatever you want, right?
Okay.
Don't you think? I mean, it's like curvature of space-time. I think it makes much more sense to see it as a curvature of gravity. It's of space, you know.
Right. I'm just saying, if you incorporate that with assuming some form of superfluidity, ether, whatever you want to parameterize it as, I'm like, okay, well, if things are going to be heading in this direction, I'm like, okay, I can see a vortex and a maelstrom and a tornado and a hurricane. I'm like, those are things I can kind of conceptualize. And if I were to extend those laws down to the very small or extraordinarily large, I'm like, that helps me better start to visualize things.
That to me, as I guess, especially as an instructor, like this is what I've done my whole life, is basically child pedagogy. You know, what annoys me with quantum mechanics is like as a description, it's really like not intuitive. And can't you guys come up with something? Come up with something that works a little better for the average person to be able to go, oh, actually, I understand what's going on in an atom. You know, I really think it's like a failure. It's like a failure in science to have been able to communicate well. And instead, they rely on like being these magicians where they go, ooh, it's quantum weirdness and nobody can understand it except for maybe a physicist who has a PhD. It's like, no,
There seems
actually,
to be
everything should come down to a natural process that is conceivable. And if it's not that way, then it's because your model sucks.
there seem to be a lot of 42-point words. I mean,
What?
it's no, I hear you, and that's why I love a lot of the stuff you're doing. Do I necessarily understand everything that's going on? No, that's one of the reasons why I want to have you on, because does anybody really know exactly what's going on? Yeah, probably not.
No,
We're computationally
no.
limited, but together, if we're working off and we have a whole bunch of cool stuff that other great minds have done in the past, it's like I think we can start to sort this out to a pretty good approximation.
I think we can find something that's a lot more just handy than quantum mechanics is the thing. Like again, like Jonathan was being interviewed, and something he said because it came up because there's like, oh, like I found this paper recently that was a hydrodynamic expression of the Schrodinger equation. Some guy had just written it. Are we still on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm looking for someone
And
for New Orleans.
and it was just like it's a reinterpretation of the Schrodinger equation, only using pressures in a fluid instead of charges. And Jonathan was saying it's like, yeah, really, it's like, because of computational irreducibility or whatever, in a way, there's like an infinite ways of expressing a given idea. What is important is what works under the context, like what is a usable model under the context to achieve what you need it to achieve. They're all right in their way, but
Here we
what
go.
works the best for the average person, I think, is the thing. And I think, as I said, it's like, working with kids, it's like I want to make a model that I can explain to somebody and people go, that makes really good sense to me, like just innately it should. And people will say, well, the universe doesn't owe that or elegance or anything. And regarding the elegance argument, I say actually the universe owes it to itself because path of least action. So therefore the universe has got to be hella elegant. It's going to be the most elegant thing ever because it's a universe. Why would it be wasting friction on stuff?
It's the
And
principle of least action. It seems like a pretty good axiom.
right, so how can your universe be that complicated in the end? It's just that we haven't figured out the simplicity of it, maybe. So
This is
oh yeah, so
fun.
here's like a gravitational field. So if we
Okay.
just say that like Plancks get smaller as you get denser, as you see, in a way, there's your gradient. It's a density gradient instead of a curve, but it achieves the same thing. And anybody can look and go, oh yeah, I can see how things would fall down that because it's like everything's smaller down there.
Now, when you say planks, are you referring to like actual like plank lengths or plank length times
Well,
two
just like
pi,
I
or like scale symmetry, if you would? Because I know you were talking a little bit about the fine structure constant, and I was just playing around in Wolfram Alpha probably a month or two ago, and I'm like, let me take the size of the observable universe, like 10 to the 26 meters, and I did that, and then what ended up happening, it's like, okay, I applied the fine structure constant. It's like, okay, comes up within the magnitude of like supercluster. Okay, apply it in. Okay, comes up to about the magnitude of the Milky Way. Apply that again. Comes up to be about the magnitude of the solar system. Apply it again. And I'm like, okay, is that kind of what you're talking about? Or am I
yeah,
missing?
well, I mean,
Okay.
exactly. I mean, sort of like energy density of space.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of what I was honing in on there. Yeah.
Basically that represents this is higher density energy. It's the same amount of energy in a much smaller space.
Okay. Yeah.
Is the way I like to think about it. And that way it sort of like, to me, it makes sense. And that way, like, light beams being affected by a gravitational field are equally getting bent by refraction because space is more dense in a gravity field. So light is going through a thicker medium when there's a gravitational potential through it, is another way of looking at it, you know? Again, it's like, these are all the same thing. I think it's just finding models that work for us and work overall. Because I think partially, like, the whole fake media thing is partially that science has really, like, since the 60s or something, been so weird. Like, there's all this technology that's awesome, but when they try and explain it, it's all this, like, probabilities, and like, they tell this story of Schrodinger's cat, which, Dirac or whoever it was basically invented to make fun of quantum mechanics. It's like, that's stupid. The cat is either dead or not. We just don't know. To say that the cat is both dead and alive at the same time is ridiculous, and that's why the story was invented, only it's gotten totally inverted by it. Now it's like, it's one of the cool things about quantum mechanics, but it's like, all of a sudden everyone's like, well, if that cat is both dead and alive, then things are true and not true at the same time, and therefore nothing is true. And therefore, fake media, I can believe whatever I want. And actually, because I believe it, that makes it true, because my consciousness affects the outcome.
I believe, and happy Thanksgiving to you, Monterey. I believe it was Erwin Schrödinger himself that constructed that meme to point out the ridiculousness of it itself. And I'm willing to I'm willing to entertain the idea, but at the same time, I also, I'm a little biased because I like Professor Carroll's version, the sleeping gas instead of the poison gas. So you have like the sleeping cat. I don't know about you, Caleigh, but I'm pretty sure I've seen a cat that was both asleep and awake at the same time. Just because the little eye thing, they're kind of like sitting there is a different
okay, they
situation.
do that all the time. That's why you have to go for the dead cat.
Right. And this is why I think I would almost argue that as well. But that's for a different ontological train of thought. I believe it was Professor Hassenfelder that sums up what you were just saying. I think there's a lot of science right now with a lot of gobbledygook. And if we can get that gobbledygook out, people will start having a little bit more faith, because unfortunately a lot of folks are losing faith in a lot of the structures that we have now. Should we be skeptical? Absolutely. But at the same time, when you get to the point where people are just throwing their hands up in the air and they really just don't care, pun intended, but you're just doing that, it's like people are going to just believe whatever they want. They'll just gravitate towards whoever's saying whatever they just want to affirm their biases and everything. And I'm like, that doesn't sound healthy for a society at all.
So. No, I think everyone feels, in a way, it's like technology is with a black and white TV that was like 4 inches by 6 inches. It's like, I grew up in the 60s, and it's like this heaven, but at the same time, it's almost like the rug was pulled out from under them in terms of the explanation for it or their understanding for it, unless you actually go into it. And then if you do, no huge diss, but I mean, the amount of roteness means that it's very hard for people to have new, novel, creative approaches to these ideas, because the rigor of them having to learn this methodology related to quantum mechanics is so intense that it's sort of like, it's like, no, you're going to have to jump through all these hoops. And after you jump through enough hoops, you're a laser beam, right? You've got a lot of focus, but you don't have any breadth anymore.
Yeah, well, I think part of this, sorry to cut you off, it's kind of, we seem to have lived in an era recently of just very focused specialization. There's something too, because I mean, I had gone to school for business primarily, and You get out there in the world, it's like you learn all these different things. You're taught to solve problems. And it's like, okay, just sell as much product as you can. This is your job. This is all you focus on. Don't worry about anything else. And it's like, maybe that's why I didn't really cut it in a lot of the corporate world, because it's like, I worry about those other things. I see how they're connected and everything. And the problem is, once I get some of that knowledge about other things, I'm like, oh, I don't think the way we were doing that maybe was that always necessarily the most ethical things to do, or at least the incentives for proper. All I know is going to a double ASB accredited business school, for whatever that means in the States here. I remember we only required three credits of ethics to graduate, and I remember the summation from that class was, "You will have the opportunity in business to do things that are unethical. Don't do that." I'm like, well, what's the consequence? Well, if you do unethical things, you might make a bunch more money. I feel like we should have had more focus on ethics in school. That's my side mini rant there. But what I'm noticing from what you're saying here, to kind of get us back on more of like the scientific track, I brought up that paper. I believe it's from looks like it's a Nakoi Sato, Graduate Frontier Sciences, University of Tokyo. And one of the first things I'm noticing at this equation here, I'm like,
Wait,
okay,
what
it looks
paper
like,
is this?
I think it's the one you were talking about. Was it hydrodynamic derivation of the Schrodinger equation and space-time curvature of a quantum particle? I literally just typed in what you told me, hydrodynamics and then Schrodinger. It was yeah, it was one of the first things that came. Oh, that actually came up in February. Okay, but I'm just looking at this equation, and I'm like, okay, this looks like the Schrodinger equation. It's like, all right, you got a wave. It's kind of doing its thing there and everything. We got h bar squared there. And then I'm looking at the delta change of theta over here. I'm not exactly sure what this means in this derivation because I haven't read it yet, but I see 4 pi, and then we got big G gravity. 4 pi, that sounds like a sphere. And I think that's how we get the hydrodynamic derivation, because, all right, we got spheres. Go.
Oh, okay. So
I'm trying to steal, woman, what you were just saying.
On which one? What?
Oh, the fluidity and stuff there. Basically, just able to conceptualize that, because it was like you said, you're talking to kids, you see a whole bunch of notation that people have never seen before. It's like, what the heck does that mean? And that can be scary, because I'm sorry, I get on a lot of tangents here, but my general gist of this is, I feel like once we got to the point where we kind of got into the nuclear age, and again, a lot of bad juju and stuff that has happened from that, but at least as a conceptual thing for your average Sally, Dick, or Jane, it's like, okay, what's an atomic bomb? It's like, all right, you get a whole bunch of energy there, and then it goes boom. It's like, all right, we get enough things compressed, things explode. We understand that. Or nuclear power there. Hopefully, personally, I think we require more thorium. But okay, you got this stuff. It's emitting heat. Heat ends up turning water into steam. We've had steam engines for a while. People understand that. But when it starts getting to the point where it's like, all right, we're going to start off. We've got psi, delta psi, x, y notation, A, B, C, D, Alice, Bob, Jane, this, C squared over this, and everything. It's like, oh my God, that's a massive wall of notation that crits me like just so hard. And I'm like, I was scared of math, Caleigh. I was scared of math. It terrified me. And now I find that just due to a confluence of events and everything, and running across great folks like you here on the internet, I'm slowly chipping away at it. And we also have tools like Wolfram Alpha. So I might have no idea what's going on, but at least doing some investigation on it could look up something. Okay, this is Bernoulli's equation here. Okay, I start to look. I'm like, all right, we got this stuff here. It's doing these things. Let me plot with it a little bit, play around. And then we got tools like geocalc and stuff. So it's like, all right, let's get a little bit of intuition for what's going on. What's happening with this right here? Oh, there seems an inversion. There seems to be a change of state, and that's interesting. And that's why I want to have you on to talk about this a little bit, because I really just find that even when I'm hearing like we're still discovering all these different states of matter, like water has, I don't know, like 7 or more different forms now that like we're starting to learn about. And it's like, all right, well, you have water, it gets cold, it becomes ice. For some reason, it seems to get bigger, which is a little weird, but also fascinating. But then again, it's like you throw a pot of water on, it's it gets some bubbles, and then almost over a very short period of time, then it's boiling. It's like, huh, I put the top on when I'm making spaghetti, it boils faster. Why? Well, I'm increasing the pressure there. That makes sense to me. So I love what you're doing there. Do I know exactly what you're doing? No. Is it right? I have no idea. But it just, at least in the conceptualization, I'm like, okay, I can start to visualize this. I can start draw some inferences and stuff. And if we can successfully model all the things we already know in a much simplified way, we already have a lot of folks saying, I'm explaining this to you. It's not exactly how I'm explaining it to you. So I'm like, well, if we already have some hand waving in here, can we stay with the same or less amount of hand waving and explain more in a simpler fashion? So that's why I like what you're doing.
I love that. I love that. It's like, okay, it's going to be the same amount of hand waving, but it's going to be a little different hand waving. Only ideally, it'll actually express better, more ideas to me. You
Well,
know?
it's what you were saying. I just bloviated a whole bunch because it's about communicating to our fellow creature. Because I don't have all the answers. I can't figure all this stuff out. But I think if we have enough human consciousness kind of focusing on this, I think we can make a lot of progress, and that excites
Yeah.
me.
Okay. And I granted I mock uh, simulationists whenever possible, but only because I think it's a cheap out. Is all. I think that's like no help at all. To say it's like we're in a simulation and it's like, yeah, that's like my trippy self going, it's like, ooh, could this possibly be real or is this hallucination? It's like, if I experienced it, it's part of my real, and that's all I can ever know. So it's sort of a moot point, and I really want to stick with the like, let's stick with sort of physical processes and how things work in a really like mechanistic way. And I'm not saying that there's not that spiritual level, and I really actually think that the in the end, this like, this sort of like that underlying that the quantum field and quantum mechanics, or in my model, this would be like this, like the event horizon. This is the event horizon, which is also the vacuum energy at the same time. It's just at an event horizon, you get to actually see it. Most of the time, we've got a bunch of matter resting on top of it, you know? But this is this layer that's like a sheet of photons all the time, speed of light, creating that low pressure that everybody's heading towards. And in theory, this layer is everything, is that place where it's like, this is heaven. This is everything all the time, everywhere. You know?
So
And
it's basically, is that where light is essentially 90 degrees?
exactly. That's where the night light would be 90 degrees, because gravity is the absolute maximum, and you've got this is the layer of total self-reflection, basically,
Hmm.
of the universe.
Well, see that's one of the fascinating things because like I'll listen to and again I love listening to things about black holes, this, that, and the other thing, and it's like, all right, that's cool. And now as I'm slowly starting to learn more, it's like, well, wait a second. If we could encode all the information within a black hole on the event horizon, i.e., its surface, well, that in and of itself is fascinating. And then I get told it's like, well, if you were to go through, you wouldn't even necessarily notice. But I'm like, well, if everything around it is basically being encoded in that, that kind of sounds like, I don't know, a mirror of everything that's being observed by the black hole. Oh God, did I just say the black hole was observer? I'm not going to apologize. Black holes are people too. I said it.
I think that's what it, see, that's my, like, more recently, I think it's like, that's the whole thing. Like, you think every single, you know, especially in my model, but even just generally, you think at the very least, like, here's a proton. In my model, this is a photon trapped over its own gravity, 2 pi thing. I've got a link to it. There's a paper. Oh, you could look that up actually too. It's in it's on the it's in Physics Substacks.
Okay.
And it's 2 pi photon black hole. I think will be the best search. 2 pi photon black hole. And some guy looked at the numbers and was like, hey, looks to me like, according to E equals mc squared at least, and maybe the other ones too, when you have a photon of 2 pi Planck length, the energy for this photon has a mass equivalency, which has a Schwarzschild radius of pi, which would give it a wavelength of 2 pi, or pi, which would give it a wavelength of 2 pi. So the math very much works out as that being a distinct possibility, which means that every mass particle is a singularity. Therefore, every mass particle has a consciousness of its own, in a way. And then neutrons especially, because they've got a double layer. But I think every single time you have a membrane, you have consciousness.
Ernesto, totally share it with the class. If you have an intuition, this is the thing. It's like we never know where the good idea may come from. I had somebody just show me, what was it? The inversion of a sphere, the transforms. But I had seen it in a video, but this was a much more high resolution thing that I was showed via Wiki Commons. And I'm like, thank you. And I like pitching ideas off of people. This is how we learn. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the most easy stuff, Mark, but after a while, it's like learning a language. It's like you got to be immersed into it a while and you start to get some intuition.
Oh, look at that. There's actually comments and things. I couldn't see them before. So my thinking is, it's like you have a membrane. As soon as you have a membrane of any kind, and I'll define a membrane as it's like a continuously linked surface, which has a tangent at some point relative to the exterior, or whatever you define a closed surface. Those mathematicians,
sounds
I'm
like
sure the mathematicians got some rule for closed surfaces. Closed surface.
A lattice with a counterpoint structure or something.
Whatever. Closed surface. As soon as you have a closed surface, okay, right? Because now you have some data, expression, sense, anything impinging upon this closed surface. And then there's the interior to the closed surface. But the fact that there is a surface here is going to mediate, and I addressed this in one of my videos, this is going to mediate the signal.
Right.
Right? So now the signal, and this is an interesting thing. Imagine this. Okay, this shape is a conductor. Okay. This shape is a conductor. It's right now it has absolutely no charge at all.
Okay, but it has the ability to carry charge.
Yes, it's a steel, it's metal, it's gold. It's a gold blob that's hollow in the middle. Okay?
I feel like it's a golden bean. Did I have to trade a cow for it?
Yeah, golden bean. Now I'm going to drop one electron, one extra electron on that bean. So now this bean is charged.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Where?
That's a good question. Where?
It is a singularity. the charge is distributed over the entire surface of that being. At all times, it's just, can you catch it or not? You know?
Oh, so we
And
wouldn't
that's,
notice unless we tried to measure, and then it would. I've never heard it analogized like that before. I like that.
and if you touched it, you would absorb the charge, and now it would be uncharged. The entire object is uncharged, right? So this is, I haven't done a video about it yet, but it's a part of like this probability stuff, because you consider, let's say this was a sphere, even just to make it even simpler. Right. It's a sphere. So, like for a photon, for instance, you think of it as being a point. It's a place. It's a locality, right? But any signal, any electron coming from any direction would charge the sphere. And now the entire sphere is charged. So I just totally delocalized that charge. And now I touch it, and I localized it again to right there.
Oh, it's like when I rub my socks against a carpet and then touch a doorknob.
You're a big, huge cloud of electricity until that moment where you get really close to the most convenient place for the electricity to exit.
See, I want to say I like the golden bean analogy a little bit better, because I feel like my priors, when I see a sphere, I feel like my mind just goes into the gobbledygook of kind of a lot of things where it's like, okay, there's gonna be this collapse and everything. But when you have an object like that and you just say you add a charge, I'm like, all right, I got a golden bean. It now has 1 unit of charge, so now it's charged. And when I localize that, I don't know, it seems easier for me to absorb, maybe because I've listened to far too many videos and lectures of folks saying it's everywhere all at once and everything like that, and my mind just kind of starts to get an error 404, and I'm like, Nani? What? But here it's like, okay, I have an object. It's kind of going around a squiggle. It looks like a cute little adorable legume, and I'm like, okay, if I don't know, for me that's easier to conceptualize. I understand the sphere is essentially the same thing, or the circle in this 2D representation, but I had never thought of it like that. But then I guess that's where they got the one electron universe conjecture from.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. In a way,
I'm not saying that's what it is, but I feel like that's how it came into conceptualization there.
Right.
But Nutty, you were talking about charged surface membrane. That's what.
Well, it's just like, okay, yeah. So now, this charge hits here, and not only that, so now the entire thing experienced this event. It was not localized to, like, this is the thing, like if you're just a rock or something and a photon hits you, that photon hit that atom, and it's very rare for it to cause any other events. But the whole thing about living things and having a membrane is that when it hits the entire thing, and therefore everything within it, is affected by the singular event from one place. You know, you stub your toe.
Theory. Yeah.
You stub your toe, your whole body jumps up and down in pain.
That's a painful perturbation.
Right? Exactly. So, and then not only that, but interestingly, it's like when you apply a charge, if this was a dielectric surface, you apply a charge here, you're going to have exactly the reciprocal charge on the opposite side in the spot. Which is like the matter, antimatter, and it's like we're always a reflection. It's like this is the inverse. We're actually always the inverse of the universe, because we're the thing that the universe carved out. It's like what's left. You know, it's what the universe didn't destroy yet.
I think you mentioned, was it a stereographic projection or something like that?
Exactly, it's the same idea. Exactly, the inversion of the sphere. I wish they still have that at pubs. Apparently, that used to be a big thing, right? You have your table, and the entire tabletop is carved in this cool picture, so that
Oh,
when you plunk down your pint,
yeah.
a nice shiny steel pint, you look at the reflection in the pint, and everything's proportional, and you have this like 360-degree scene there in your table.
Oh, maybe
It's like,
was it a little something like this? Maybe not exactly for the mirror,
I mean,
but
I'm sure mostly they were lewd. It was bars at pubs and stuff, you know. It would have been
oh,
something.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I got sent this because I'd seen this in a previous video I'd watched before, and this is the Thurston sphere inversions, and I think there's how many different are there 5 solutions to this? I don't know. It's
Oh,
basically
cool.
they're taking a 3D sphere and inverting it topologically continuously in a smooth fashion. Oh, that oh, kind of looks like a couple of cones there. Oh, look, it's spinning around. It's doing all these cool types of things and everything in a continuous motion. And I don't know. I love little things, and I think they go into the Earth at one point. Oh no, they're doing. I don't know about you. That kind of looks like some of those pictures of the black holes and stuff. And apparently, I can go through itself if we're going to assume it's like a boson or something. They can totally do that. It's doing these fancy little
Oh, is this a
articulations.
different? This is a different way of inverting the sphere.
Yes, it's going through. I think they go through 5 methods here. I think it
Is
might be
there like,
5.
can you download the entire code in Geo?
That's a great question. I'm going to assume so because like this reminds me of a lot of the things that you were showing there. And
Oh
now, oh
yeah,
yeah, it transforms into the Earth here. This is really cool. And because I
yeah.
remember they
Because
had
I mean, if you know what you're doing with the sliders, you just insert. You know, you just insert a variable and set limits and get it to go back and forth between
geocalc.
those things.
You need to sign up for, right?
No, no, it's completely free. It's nada. It's just nada. It's just
I
like,
must have clicked on the wrong thing then, or I was just didn't explore it enough. But
I don't think
yeah, no,
so.
I had seen
Oh,
that. And
I might have paid $4.99 for it because it's just so freaking awesome.
oh, I don't care. I mean, I'll pay a couple of bucks for something that's useful. I mean, I'm subscribed to Mathematica right now. I still haven't fully been able to successfully use it. Oh, I need to download the client side, don't I? I didn't have enough room until I cleared out my old iCloud and everything.
Oh my
Um,
god.
well, these are things. The reason I share those stories is because when I share these stories, I get those responses, and I have other people tell me it's like I ran into the exact same thing. It's like I feel like if we actually get this knowledge out here and be like, you are not alone. There are solutions to these things. I think that's how we like level up humanity and actually like if we can make things easier for our fellow creature and we can focus more on cool stuff like this is how I think, I don't know, we actually become space. I want to get into Star Trek realms of technology faster than we're currently on.
Oh, it's funny because I just did another podcast with my friend Jason Louv, who
Hmm.
runs this website Ultra Culture,
Yeah.
and this other website Magic Me.
Was that one of your more recent ones? I think I had come across it.
Yeah, it was
Was
just
it
the other
like a
day.
like
I
two?
was just
Oh, okay.
he rang me up and it was just
I might be lagging a little bit. Oop.
look at Terrence McKenna's Time Wave Zero. I don't know, like I really got into it and got deep into it back in the day when it first came out. And his whole thing with novelty as being an essential component of the universe. And he mapped out the I Ching, the waveform of the I Ching. If you just multiply it and multiply it and multiply it and multiply it and layer it, ends up being this huge length of time. And when you map it out onto human history, can't remember how we started, but anyways, it's like the novelty builds up really crazy. It's like right now, things are insane. Everything is turning over so fast. It just seems like, can you keep up? And the main thing is take some deep breaths. You know, it's like there's lots of eddies in the water, but there's only one main current. And that's the thing to hold on to, you know, like take some deep breaths, take a little bit of a chill, Nobody's dying. That like, well, some people are, but I mean, most of us aren't. So let's just not get all like
If you're not
hype.
immediately, oh my God, I am immediately in imminent danger and stuff like that. You can do a little woosah things because
Right?
I feel like the same way because everyone's when I started this channel, I was mostly just I got tired of yelling at the TV screen, so I entered onto the more political side of YouTube, and I'm like, wow, people are just really mean to each other. And I kept on trying. I'm like, let me try to solve these problems. And I would ask people, and a lot of times I would have long conversations, not even live and stuff. And I think that's where you get a lot of the juiciest information. And I would talk to people and I would go through kind of the Socratic method and trying not to have it be just a standard circular argument because I'm trying to figure out what is the main point of control. This, not all people, that, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately, far too often, I gotta give a shout out to my brother for this. I didn't want it to be true, but I think a lot of times it just came down to I don't like that person or those people. And I'm like, well, I can't help you there and everything like that. I ain't God or anything. If you just don't like those people, that sounds like an issue between you and them. And now you're layering on all these different other things as reasons why you don't like them. So that's why I just got sick and tired of that. So I'm like, let me go to my safe space of science. And it's been a hell of a ride. And I love it. I feel like it's an actual positive thing we can kind of contribute to society. So that's why I like these things.
No, I think so. And I think it's like, like however somebody is, I think the one thing to remember, and it's like that's why I didn't do it, but and you know, we haven't known each other that long, but everyone is just trying to make it better. Like any crazy ideas that people have, like when people offer, like when I suggest, as I annoyingly do all the time, neutron decay cosmology. What are we wasting our time for? It seems so simple. The neutronium falls through space-time because, hey, everything is there and nothing is there, so what the hell else is it going to do? It's everywhere. Oh, but now it's got to be someplace because conservation. So then it drips out like one drop here and one drop there, distributed over the surface of the universe, and then it all collects back again. Okay, I don't know. I tell myself that story and I go, that seems like a good story to me. So I'm going to try and sell this story because I think it would reassure a lot of people. Like one of my videos, The Woo and Why, is partially about that. It's like, there's a compromise. We could say, the quantum flux, that layer of pure light, that is heaven. Okay, and that's where we all go, because that's what's inside us all when you go deep enough. Because at your proton and at your neutron, that's what you're made of. And your neural net is the shiny surface of the electricity that runs through your brain, which is basically exactly like that. It's like the electricity as it runs through the wire. And it's the shape it makes in your brain that makes it you, And everyone's got a different shape, so everyone's different. That's the way it goes. Because the universe likes diversity. Everything is different. Look, you can't even compare any two Barbie dolls. It doesn't matter how much they look alike to the atom. No, I'm sorry, they're not. And even if they were to the atom, the electron configuration between those two items is not going to be the same between the two of them. You're going to entangle the whole thing. Good luck. That's what I say. So it's like, let's just, I don't know. Let's just look for something simple and chill out and try and stick to the good things, like making sure that everyone's got some water and electricity and enough food to eat. Because really, honestly, that's how I live in most of my life, and I'm perfectly happy. Like I'm very Emerson that way. It's like meager. It's like, what do I need? It's like I'm alive. I got some clothes here and there. It's like a little fancy outfit once a year. That's cool.
Yeah, it's one of those things where once you just have your just standard basic level of existence, like once we actually get to true post scarcity where there ain't a human being on the planet that literally needs to worry about, oh my God, where's my next meal coming from? Am I gonna die from this just sudden change in weather there? I think that's a good thing to work towards. And then if we can have some fancy cool stuff on top of that, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because at that point now you can inspire people to do all this different work and everything. And if anything out of the whole blockchain thing, I feel like one of the greatest things we could take away, it's like a lot of folks, they're afraid to share ideas because they're like, well, if I'm right, somebody's going to steal my idea or something. I'm like, well, at least with the internet, things are mostly time stamped and dated. And if we have the blockchain, it's like, okay, we have all this fancy citation and everything, and giving credit where credit's due is important. That's why, like, in all my videos, if I'm using someone's video or someone's concept or something, I try to link them there. One, just for my own narcissistic purposes of being like, where did that idea come from? So I can actually go back and keep track of it. And just give a shout out to the person and everything. It's like, okay, because if again, if you never know where a good idea may come from, what was it? Even Professor Einstein at one point, it's like he's looking at a dude. It's like, oh, it would stink if that window washer fell off the ladder there. I would totally put that in there and everything. And like, I think he did give a shout out to the guy. I don't know if he knew his name, but it's like, here's where I got the idea from. It's not just like, oh, it just came out of nowhere. It's like you have this idea, you just tell people the truth. That's the thing. It's like you don't need to plagiarize or anything. If you got it from this person, you give a citation. And if we have the blockchain, you could easily do that. It's like, or just even a YouTube video, something like this. It's like, here's some useful links. Here's the particular paper I was covering here. Here's my discussion with this person on the internet. Let me cite that. I even remember Professor Carroll in one of his AMAs. Maybe he's explaining the multiverse or the Einstein equations. He's like, if you happen to figure something out, maybe you'll cite this video. And he said that in a little bit of jest, but I'm like, I'm going to take the good professor seriously because there's a couple ideas in. That's why I go back and I'll usually put like a little timestamp and be like fascinating or what's going on there, so I can search for my own self, go back, take that idea. If I found someone else that said something like that, and if I'm playing on Wolfram Alpha and be like, oh my God, they were both right. They just look a little bit differently. Why wouldn't I give a shout out? It's also good for networking.
That was a super like what was, as I said, like one of the takeaways from the talk that Jonathan Garrod's had is like the thing about once they did this Ruliad and all this, the Wolfram Alpha, like once they evolved it more fully and they really saw where they were heading with this idea, which is basically like L system fractal. I mean, it's like so crude in a way conceptually. It's like, okay, so you come to an intersection and you make a choice. And you come to an intersection, you make a choice. Stick a bunch of things. Let's see what happens if we apply that rule ad infinitum. It's like, let's just cause some feedback. And this is the series of components that are interrupting that feedback. So we're going to draw a picture of where this goes, you know? And then you run it. And then you find out it's like, okay, well, let's make a picture of all the possible components and all of this. And then it's like, wow, it's like, they all sort of are the same. And it's like all our viewpoints of the world, it's like they're all correct in their way. And the thing is coming to a commonality that we can share so that we have the most like resonance with each other, so that we're more laminar, you know, so that we're more in flow with each other. If we all agree on some basic things, then everything can just proceed and we don't need to think because we already know. That's what the Bible used to be, you know, like that's what these rule books used to be about. It's just like, obviously they're causing a little consternation and are not functioning the way that they were originally
is it the old text, or is it the people that often are interpreting the text? Because we all realize that human beings are totally not sinners and stuff like that has been specified. But jumping back to the Ruliad there, I believe, are you referring to something kind of like this?
Although this is going to be weird, and it's going to be about a different
title of the conference was something like Ground Truth or Turtles All the Way Down. And so it seems as though there's one Ruliad. I don't think it rules them all. And it might be just hyper-rulial turtles all the way down.
Yes, it's on the back of an infinite number of hyper-rulial turtles.
Various people are commenting on the outrage of hacking the universe on a MacBook Air.
I couldn't resist playing that as soon as you brought up the Ruliad.
turtles all the way down. It's really adds all the way down. But that's the thing. It's like
the
we're all right.
Go on.
We're all correct. Relative
well, within our
to
different
us.
popular. Well, that's the thing. We each have our own unique perspective and stuff.
You know, and what we need to do is just try and figure out how that we can like get as much, you know, look for the places where we're in resonance so we can agree on these things and try to agree on as many things as possible so that we can go, okay, this is where we can now go without having to worry about it because we agreed on these things. You know?
It's that low resolution, just kind of generalized narrative. It's like, all right, we are humanity. We're trending in a particular direction. Let's do some stuff. And I kind of harken back to it's like, well, if you're going to live your life as a movie, wouldn't you want to make it the best movie possible? I mean, I don't know. Do I always have the best scenes? No, not at all. Like, I was incredibly late for this because I sent the links and then didn't notice until far after. I'm like, oh, YouTube totally holds channel links and stuff like this. So I'm like, oh my God, message me on Twitter. Oh, how am I not even following Caleigh on Twitter and everything? It's because my standard process is I go to a person's about thing. If they have a link there, I assume it's there. If not, because I checked before, I didn't see a link to the Twitter. So I'm like, I need to start up a Tumblr, don't I? Because I want to talk to Caleigh. And I'm like, wait, what does one do on Tumblr? I don't even know. It's like, all right, I have the YouTubes, I have the too many different platforms to keep track of it. Oh my God, it makes my brain, because everyone's a little bit different. You do this, you do that, and then you do. I don't want to do something wrong there, and I'm gonna get in trouble and everything like that. But yeah. But
too many platforms. Oh my God, we're about to crash. I think everyone's gonna get so saturated. Like, I don't know anybody that's not a little fed up with like. Seriously, every single restaurant I go to needs to have its own app. You know, like it's getting a little overdense there. It's got a little too far, I think.
I'm going to say something extraordinarily controversial right now, Caleigh. Do we need a generalized AOL for like the internet? Do we need to make AOL great again or bring it back or resurrect? Because all I'm saying is that was my introduction to the internet. What was AOL? Did we need AOL? No. It was a generalized GUI of you got a browser, you got a messaging service, you got this. And I sit back, I'm like, why is there nothing like that for like the generalized internet right now? It's like, here's my preferred browser. Put this in here. Here's my preferred messenger. Or just have like all the messengers you use and just funnel it into one. I think there exists pieces of this. I don't know why it's not all together, probably because of updates and everything, but I feel like that would make things a lot more coherent, because even on different platforms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, I look at these things and some of the arguments there, I'm like, I don't even think these people are arguing there. And I look at how it's laid out, like the YouTube comment section is notorious for this. I'll get a response to something, I'm like, oh, is this person criticizing me? And it ends up being from a comment that I made on someone else's comment there. And I'm like, oh no, they're responding to this other person there that wasn't even the original comment, but they don't have the at there, or there's an at there and I'm not there. And I'm like, oh my God. And we all know nobody would ever misunderstand each other on that. It's I don't know. But we've been going for a little over an hour now, Caleigh. Caleigh's link, it was asked before who this is. This is Miss Caleigh Fisher here. She is the current purveyor of Neutron Decay Cosmological model here on YouTube. Her link is down in the doobly-doo there. You want to give some folks some final thoughts, wrap up on anything you want to touch upon?
I don't know. Be nice. Be nice, be helpful. Find purpose.
That's that
Purpose
was something
good.
that
Makes you feel good.
Well, this has made me feel pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, because I learned something too, and I love that golden bean. I'm totally gonna use that just as a conceptualizational framework for localization. I had never thought about it in that way. I'm thinking, I'm like, oh my God, I got the sphere doing everything at once, and I'm willing to entertain that. But this is like, all right, you got this thing, you add a tiny bit of stuff to it, and then you touch it and you go bing. It's like, okay, well, that's a local there. I've touched
But
on
also the other
I've
thing
touched-
is that it's everywhere. That charge is distributed. It's like, where's the localized part? It's not actually localized yet. It's all over the place. It could be a lot of places. It's in our heads. This is why that's how I developed the photon model, but we have to go and cut this off.
It's okay. Well, hey, you know what? We can always do it temporally in the future. And with that, peace out, everybody. Be safe. And again, we have yet to prove that.
World exists on the top of a giant turtle.
Peace out, everybody.
Have you guys checked out the Memes of Destruction's channel? He's an interesting dude. I like